don't know if you've got the bar. Ah, right, got it. I don't know if you have the bar along the top, but it's kind of obscuring my text, but the text simply says that life sketching is vital. So whatever you want to draw or paint, whether it's bowls of fruit or people or landscapes or wildlife, it doesn't matter. You've got to sketch a lot from life to learn how these things, how they're built and how they. So this is a typical sketch page from one of my sketchbooks. This happens to be up in the Hebrides, but these are common buzzards. And the aficionados amongst you will know that that's a hooded crow. The crows in Scotland and all the way around to Israel are grey and black. They're not just black. So I sketched all these from life, but a lot of these, it's a bit misleading saying life sketching because you're sketching a lot from memory. The bird has flown past, you've got to try and remember. And so that's why when I started out, I went to bird of prey parks and falconry places and zoos, so I could draw the birds in captivity, which tend to move around a lot less. You know. So this is that's a page which was done over the period of a couple of days on the buzzards up in Scotland, but they're the same buzzards, apart from the fact they vary in plumage from dark to light throughout Britain and throughout Europe, actually. Now, this might not look like a sketch. This might look more what you would call a finished painting, but I sketched these birds from life down at a place called Nanta Arian, where they feed the kites. So you can go there and see something like 200 red kites, or down by Rayada, where they also feed them. So I sketched these from life, but I painted them later on. And I added that same estuary again, the Maudak estuary, looking down to Cardigan Bay. So this is what you might call a studio sketch. Starts off from life and finishes up quite complex and like a finished painting. You know. Now also, I do a lot for magazines and books and prints and cards. And so this illustration is to show you the different color forms. This is a typical buzzard, brown and white. That's an average. You see 5 out of 10 buzzards will look like this, but quite a few will also be very pale, especially if you're in Eastern Europe or you're in Southwest England. They tend to be more pale. And then the further north you get, generally, they can be quite dark. They can be darker like this one, but they can be anything in between. So when you're drawing a buzzard, you don't have to be precise with the plumage because they vary. These are two rare buzzards we get in Britain. This one's called a rough-legged buzzard. That comes in the winter from Scandinavia and the subarctic. And this is a honey buzzard, slightly different bird, which actually lives on bees and wasp nests, believe it or not, and does nest in places like the New Forest or the border country near Shropshire, actually. But it is an uncommon bird, and that has a huge variety of plumages, from old reddy brown like that through to black and white through to an average. So again, these were put together from the sketchbooks from a magazine, the Raptor magazine. So this is a slightly different one. This is one we did last year with the Nature Observations magazine, but it's basically what we're going to do today. So if you look at this bit here, if you want to use a ruler, they're about 6 or 7 inches long on a ruler and about the width of a ruler to make this particular shape before you split it down the middle. And that's what we'll be doing in about 2 minutes time. And then we'll be gradually adding bits to it and making an average sort of buzzard. Now this is a rather special sketch page I made down in Carmarthen. You can see buzzards, red kite, goosander, kingfisher, dipper, and a brown trout. Now, some of you might not like fishing, but I actually caught this brown trout and ate it the next day. Now, while I was fishing for this brown trout at the bottom, you see the worm on the hook? whilst I was fishing for that brown trout, I was leaning on a tree and fishing quietly. And I looked round the other side of the tree, and that kingfisher was sat there on the other side of the tree on a branch, and we were both hidden from each other. So that trout was far too big for the kingfisher, so I didn't deprive the kingfisher of its dinner. So this is what we're going to do today. I hope you've got, you're all sent this as a PDF, I think. So hopefully you will have printed it out. And then finally, just to show you how buzzards are masters of the air, you see these bubbles here, they're called thermals. They are bubbles of warm air. And on a warm day, these bubbles of warm air rise, and the birds of prey circle with them. And they can circle up. So when the osprey that's here at the moment, in a couple of days' time, that osprey will be over the English Channel. And it will rise up on warm air in Somerset or something, and it will rise up thousands of feet, and then it will glide down to France. Then it'll fly through France and Spain, then it'll rise up in southern Spain, and then it will glide down to Morocco. And in a couple of weeks' time, these ospreys from here will be in Senegal and Gambia, though they've never flown before. They've never flown before a couple of weeks ago, and they go by themselves, the young ones, and they fly through the Sahara Desert or alongside the edge of the Sahara Desert. And when they get to Senegambia, which is on Northwest Africa, they all turn right and they all go to the same place in Senegal and Gambia. And these birds have never flown beyond the Dovey Estuary or the estuary here. And if that's not a miracle of creation, I don't know what is. So they need warm air, hot air. So anyway, I'm quite good at hot air. There we are. So that's the rabbiting over. Oh, someone has asked, do we need rulers? You don't necessarily need rulers. I was just saying, if you want to be precise, you can use a ruler and it's about 6 inches long and the width of the ruler, and that will give you the equivalent of this. Although this is a little bit wider than an average ruler. So it's about 6 inches long. Right, I'm going to change to the other camera. The technology is working, hopefully. USB camera. Right, so we have my paper here, upside down, back to front. Right, so I say, here's the ruler. So I say, you don't have to use a ruler, but I'll just, so if we, I say they're a bit wider than the ruler, so you see that I keep forgetting I need to do these lines stronger so that they show up on the camera. So that's roughly speaking. So if you can then divide this, that's 7 inches long. I'll write that there, 7 inches. So we're dividing it down the middle. And I always call the tail on a lot of birds of prey is virtually always this sort of shape. So it's like a piece of cheese, a wedge of cheese. So if you come from about here and do a pyramid, so don't worry about having extra lines or rubbing out or whatever. I always say the same thing. If you want to rub things out now, you can do, or rub them out later, or you will draw over the top of them. And this, we need a smile along the bottom here. And don't worry about it being precise. It's just a curve. a concave curve. Now, the wings, we're going to divide them roughly down the middle. So that's 3.5, so that's half of 3.5 inches, or centipedes if you are following the French. So yeah, I know that some of you will be far faster than I am, and some of you will be slower. So I'm not doing this in a hurry. Now we also need to put a smile on the end here, because the flight feathers, the primaries, are longer. The third primary is usually the longest, the second or the third is the longest one. And also the shape of the feathers is not, these are not straight lines. We just put the straight lines on to, oh, I just realized I put the 7 inches in where the head has to go. Now the head is another sort of triangle. If you just do it roughly with a little bump on the top. I'm just going to close the curtains. Because I live on an estuary here, it's quite bright. It's quite bright, so sometimes it floods the paper. Okay, so we're now going to, if you go from the tail at an angle, something like that, across there and across there. These are the covers, that's C-O-V-E-R-T-S, that cover these are the secondary feathers. These are the primary feathers. Primary meaning the first feathers. They're the most important ones for flight. Now, over the base of the primary feathers, you've got a shape like that. These are the primary covers. And again, this can vary, so you don't have to be precise on this. Now, one of the most difficult things is the fact that we've got 10, most birds have 10 primary feathers here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Don't worry if you can only get 8 in, or you might get 11 in, but don't worry about it. So what you've got to do, you've got to sort of divide that down the middle, like that, and then divide that in half. Divide this in half. That's not quite in half. And that. And then when you divide those in half, you will have, you only want one here at the top bit. So that's 1, 2, 3 primaries, and then here 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This one wants 2. Put 2 in there. And divide that in half. And divide that in half. Just make that one darker. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I'll just rub that middle one out. So don't worry about rubbing things out or drawing over or whatever. Now the secondaries, they vary in number quite a lot. We're going to just do them roughly the same size. See, they're sloping in more. And if you see, all of these are going out like rays. And they're all attached. The bones actually go here. The only bones in the wing are here and here. So all these main feathers are attached up on that what we would call an arm bone. And the same goes with the tail. So most tails, but not all, have 12 feathers. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then they all overlap each other. And now we need to put the body in. Now the body is basically two curves, like so, and they meet about there on the tail. And that's in a lot of birds of prey, you'll get, I'll rub that out. The undertail covers, or the tails on the top of the tail, can be quite pale, especially with birds like harriers. And that's the whole basic shape. So now we're going to refine it. So we want to get rid of these straight lines, put some nice curves, but still. And then this one needs to go like that. So just to make it easier, I'll rub those bits out. And then I think, as I've said before, the primary feathers are quite pointed. You find bird of prey feathers, you see the outer ones are really quite pointed, and they become less pointed as they go inwards. So by the time you get down here, they've more or less got a rounded end. So going from pointed to rounded gradually as we go from the outer wing to the inner wing. So you need to move that one over a bit. Rub that one out. So don't be scared of drawing over the top or rub it out or whatever. So here, now, again on birds of prey, the inner bit here, we want to do another curve, because the inner bit is usually white. You look at buzzards, look at the base of the primary feathers. You see they're white, and then you get bars. This bit is quite pale. These patterns vary tremendously. You want a dark outer feathers, pale inner feathers. So we can already rub these out. So now what you want to do is make a little, this sort of knife-like shape here. And as I say, getting these outer ones, they're usually the outer 5 feathers are the most pointed, but they also get slightly broader as they go out. And in fact, they go in here. This is called emargination, but we won't go into that now. That's so that you've got these wing slots, so they can control the air as they're flying by moving their wings and feathers up and down. The air goes through the slots, and the air gathers underneath the wings and increases the air pressure so that the wings lift, so that the birds lift. And our noisy, smelly airplanes have flaps on the back of the wings to try and emulate what these beautiful creations are doing. Even if it might go on to swallow a rat in 5 minutes' time, it flies beautifully before it does that. So as I say, these feathers are becoming broader, and they're becoming less pointed. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, the main 5 outer feathers on many birds of prey like buzzards and eagles. You'll notice that if you're talking about a falcon's wing is a lot different. because they are, the shape is overall different. Move that along a bit. So then by the time we get here, this bit, there's a slight curve on this. So we do that 1, 2, 3. And this bit here as well has a slight curve on it. So we can come above the line and then above the line like that. You can see why, because by the time we get to the body, this is forming a more solid surface, whereas the outer ones need to open to control the air. These masters of the air. Right. So we need a little bit of body here, just to give it a bit of, literally give it a bit of body. Now the end of the tail feathers, they're virtually all this shape. But by the time you get to the middle tail feather, the shaft is in the middle. So if you find a tail feather that looks like that, a lot of barring on them, gets thinner as it goes up. You find a tail feather like that, you know that that's from the right hand end of the tail, because the narrow bit's on the outer bit. If you find it more broad with the shaft in the middle, that's from the middle of the feather. If you find it with the narrow bit on the left-hand side, that's from the left-hand side of the tail. So they get just like these, exactly the same. The shaft on the outer feather has a narrow edge, and then by the time you get in here, the shaft is in the middle. So I'm going to just, I'm going to put the shafts in here just like so. The middle two feathers often overlap. So you might see 5 on either side and a big one in the middle. It's not a big one, it's 2 feathers overlapping. Again. So that's the basic shape. Now we're going to do the body. So on a buzzard, you will see that basically they have like a pear shape on the throat, and then what looks like a brassiere and 2 flanks. And that's your average buzzard. So the throat will often be paler than the rest of the head. And the breast will have that sort of shape. I say they vary tremendously. And then the sides will look like that. But as I say, they can be all dark or all light or whatever. So we just want to put the beak. Beak's quite small on a buzzard. That's lopsided. And now the feathers here are in lines. They're never as neat as this, of course. They do overlap. And here as well. But if you look at, if you've got field guides or photographs of buzzards, you'll see there's quite a variety, and then there will be single feathers. As I say, they won't always be as neat as this, but they can look quite mottled, brownish, brown on the head basically. We'll draw the head in a minute here. and then shade that in brown, shade that in brown. So I'm drawing them strong so that they look like patterns, and they do vary. I just rub that center line out, so they won't be as neat and tidy as pattern-like as this. They'll be more individual. And that's the other thing about all birds. All of their plumages, whether it's a house sparrow or a red kite or a buzzard or whatever, every feather on every bird will be different, will be unique to that bird. So here we've got a broad line of, these are the secondaries, and then we have a narrower line of the secondary covers. Then we have an even narrower line, and basically by the time you get up to these are usually quite solid brown, a reddy brown sometimes. So that's fairly distinctive in a buzzard, that bit will be brown, apart from on those very pale ones that I showed you earlier. But on an average buzzard, they will. And these will be, you might get one line or two lines of feathers like that. And then here, I'm simplifying these. These are like little ovals with, so those solid brown. And you will get all sorts of little shapes in between these. Now, when we look at the secondary covers, we've got the same sort of shape. Sorry, the primary covers, we've got the same sorts of shapes. There will be a broader outer bit, then another couple of lines of feathers, and this will be quite, these will be individual feathers, but I'm colouring them all in, well, black and white and all together. So this is how you will see them at a distance. Close up, you will see they are all sorts of shapes like this in lines when you see them close up, like little spearheads or whatever. They will be, and they're all individual, and they'll have little bars within them. You look at, if you go to a bird of prey display, they usually have a tawny owl or an eagle owl. You look at their feathers, and every single feather is a work of art. They're superb. So that's an average sort of buzzard. Now here, remember, I said that the outer ones are quite dark. So if you're colouring these, or you want to colour them later, the tips of the primaries will be almost black, as I'm doing them here. And then as you move into the bird, they will get browner and browner. All these feathers will get browner, dark browner, and these will be darker. They're further out, closer to the edge they are, as it were, closer to the bottom of the wing. And then by the time we get to here, this bit is not quite as strong, but it is a common sign of a buzzard that they will have a darker bar, a thicker, darker bar along the bottom of the wing. Now you notice also I'm doing the shading in, because that's how these feathers, if you look at the individual barbers, as they're called, you notice that they're at an angle like that. Those will be pale, but these will go at a roughly 45 degrees angle. So that's what I'm doing here. This side, they will come in this way. This side, they're coming in this way. So if we do a pale line along the bottom there, these are marked like that. Now the next line up, we want to make it parallel to this. These bars are a lot thinner, and they get thinner and paler as they go up. So one of the things you'll notice about buzzards is this white patch here, which you're only going to see on a juvenile eagle or sea eagle. So wherever you live in England or the borders, if 99.9% of all eagles seen in Wales are buzzards, because people just don't realize how big buzzards are. But eagles can be twice the size of buzzards. A female eagle is almost twice the size of a male buzzard. So if you see them close up, you wouldn't make the mistake. But it's the same with sparrowhawks and goshawks. You know, a female goshawk can be twice the size of a male sparrowhawk. And you certainly see goshawks around the Welsh borders. So that's most of the wing done. I'll just make that stronger. I say this bit in a buzzard is almost solid brown color. Now we get the same thing on the tail that we do on the secondaries here. The tail band on most birds, let alone birds of prey, is thicker, wider. So I'm reversing this is called hatching, by the way. That's the official name of this. It's called hatching. So if you're drawing and sitting on leg, you could do a lot of hatching. Now, again, these get thinner as they go up. And again, in quite a lot of birds of prey, harriers and what have you, hawks, have these barrings. And because they're broader at the bottom, the tails often look paler the further up you go. So that's a bit darker. Fade that in. So that's your average buzzard. Now we're going to draw this buzzard's head, and you'll note that the basic shape is an egg. The number of things that start off with an egg, it's quite amazing. Of course, evolutionists are so daft, they say, which came first, the chicken or the egg, when it's obviously the chicken. Right, so we're going to do an egg shape here. So don't worry if you don't draw a perfect egg. It's a fairly longish egg. Any of you know about eggs and will know that things like guillemots have very long eggs, like that. So they roll on the cliff edge. They don't roll off. They roll round in a circle. Whereas chickens basically don't nest on cliff edges. Right, now this is the most complicated bit. You see this shape? That's the shape that you're looking for to put into the head, because the eye's there and the beak is there. So that's the shape that we want to do. But first of all, if you draw a line roughly about a third of the way along the egg and a third of the way down, again, just roughly speaking, that's where you want the eye within this shape here. If you draw a circle. As I've showed you before, if you can't, if you just do it tentatively to begin with, and then get stronger, then most eyes are, birds' eyes are mainly, I've done that too close. Most birds' eyes are circular. They're also, they couldn't, if you get a bird like an owl, an eagle owl, you couldn't have the eyes any bigger. They're so big in the head, they almost touch. They have hundreds times more mechanical parts than our eyes. And their vision of birds of prey is something like 8 times clearer than human vision. These eyes are so big. Okay, now we want this, remember we're looking for this beak shape. I say do it tentatively. You can always draw over it or rub it out. And then you're looking for something about like so. Another sort of straight line to do the basic beak shape. So I've done these quite pale, but we're going to, now we need to make this, the back of the head bigger. And the underneath here, this is the chin, will come down. In fact, the back of the head can often be slightly angular, the chin coming down. Just realizing I'll put it more directly underneath the camera. So we have to do a little forehead here. And we're making that slightly flatter. Rub those bits out, making it slightly flatter. And we want the top and the chin to join the beak roughly the same place. Now this bit here, as I'm sure you all know, is called the supraorbital ridge. That's a ridge that protects the eye when a peregrine's diving at 245 miles an hour. 245 miles an hour? Yes, that's what they dive at. They're not flying, they close their wings and dive. A buzzard can dive at 100 miles an hour. So this protective ridge here protects the eye from dragonflies and flies and trees and what have you, because a lot of hawks stoop into trees at great speed. Right, so the middle of the eye is the pupil, which are virtually always black. Now the rest of the eye can be, in birds of prey, it's often orange or yellow, but it can be all sorts of colors. And around the eye, it has this, it's like flesh. And that again is usually yellow. If the rest, because the base of the beak is roughly divided in half. If you do a line, something like that. This is the outer beak, which is made of the same stuff as our nails. So it's pretty tough, the beak, but the inner part of the beak is this softer material. And then here, somewhere here, usually you will find a nostril. Now the one on the osprey, cleverly enough, closes because it's waterproof, because it dives into water. The one on the peregrine is designed, if you're diving at 245 miles an hour with wind going up your nose, you're not going to feel very comfortable. So the peregrine has a very special nose which diverts the airflow. We won't go into that now, but and then here we have these bristles, and the top, these are called mandibles. So the top mandible is usually the biggest, and the bottom one again goes with a slight curve, joins. So the most important thing on many birds of prey is this hooked tip. That's what they tear things apart with. And here, if it was a peregrine, you would have a notch for breaking necks. In hawks, you've got a sort of ridge like that. And again, if you look, if you can see birds close up in a zoo or whatever, you'll see that you'll see the edge of the gape is often yellow because it's this same material. And now on the beak is virtually always black, and that fades up into a kind of often sort of bluey color, and the bottom bit the same. So the inner bit will often be yellow. And that's the most important thing here is the cheek, because this is where the bird's ears are behind, like they are on an owl. They're behind those discs on their face. The ear, this is basically all ear. So this, we won't go into the patterns, but they will often have a distinctive pattern like that. A lot of birds will have a pale eye stripe, this bit here. Lots of different birds have pale eye stripes. And then we're going down into, we won't go down into the patterns down here. I say on a buzzard's head is fairly uniform brown, and it won't have a very strong eye stripe per se. That is common. And the edge of the cheek, and then these little finer feathers. By the time we get here, the feathers are quite tiny, really quite tiny, and they're almost, in some birds they are almost bristles to help them guide flies into their mouths. So there's a thought for you. Stupid at 245 miles an hour with wind rushing up your nose and stopping flies going into your mouth. Unless, of course, you eat flies. And that, because that ridge is there, that will often have a shadow. And that's why birds of prey look fierce, because they've got this shadow, because of this ridge sticking out to protect their eyes. Right. So that actually is a bigger beak. If you look at this one that I've drawn on that one. One of the reasons being this camera is slightly distorts things. And I say this bit here, it's called the sear, C-E-R-E, and that's often, I say it's a bit like flesh, it's softer than the hard beak. Okay, I don't know how we're doing for time. What time is it? 15:20. Have we got time to do a kite?
Yes.
What time should we be finishing, Ben?
We normally do about an hour.
Shall I start the kite?
If you would like, yes.
Of course, you can always, you've got the sheets, haven't you? So
yes.
If we go over time, you can always finish these at home, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to do the same. I'm going to start the kite anyway. Okay. So the same, again, about 7 inches long, a bit narrower. The kite's wings are longer and narrower than the buzzard's. Again, down the middle. And this wonderful tail. I'm sure that some of you live in parts of England where kites have been reintroduced, and you know they have this wonderfully shaped tail. And again, a slightly narrower body. They are they're bigger birds than buzzards, but they're more slender birds, roughly the same sort of shaped head. Now we're going to divide that bit into halves again, but the kite's wings, if we look at this, we've got two angled wings, which are roughly two lines, which are roughly parallel. So we go from there to there, because their wings are often angled back. As a matter of fact, this one goes slightly narrower when you go to the tip. These are not parallel. This goes narrower. We need to join that up like that and do the same that we did for the buzzard. But well, I've got the basics down, so I'll slow down now, because I'm probably going too fast for some of you and not fast enough for others. So I'll slow down a bit now. But we're doing basically the same things that we did with the buzzard, and they're very, very similar. You can see the very, very similar patterns. Only in the kite, this bit tends to be the whitest bit, this sort of panel. As in the buzzard, the panel is broader. But we've got the same, we're going to do the same curve, but more angled, because we've got to get these 10, again, these 10 primaries. I'll split that down the middle. Split that down the middle. Split that down the middle. And then split those in half. And this one, because it's broader, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, we've actually got 10 there. So those are the dark base, those are the dark outer primaries. And again, make a nice, put some curves onto it. There are no straight lines in nature, either, they're all. And then curve this slightly down. Now the first primary again, like a knife or a spear tip. Second one, slightly longer. So in birds of prey, the second one is, the second and the third ones are the longest ones. Now the kite has a narrower wingtip than the buzzard, as you can see from this, if we compare them. Although this one is, that one turned out to be a bit broader than I intended. But again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 main, and then they're getting broader as they go in. In fact, I can make these just a little bit longer. Fill them in. And then these, the kite doesn't have a dark bar. Kite doesn't have a dark bar along here. It's because the inner part is darker and it gets lighter as it goes round. So we'll rub those out. And have the same white panel here, but be whiter down here. Again, the same dark on the edge of the primary covers. And the same sort of basic shapes. That also goes for an osprey, it goes for lots of birds of prey. They have these same sorts of patterns. Now we'll make that a bit curvy. Now we'll do another, divide this up. Remember the secondaries go curve in slightly. Those are the secondaries. Those are the primaries. And so we start in here, darker. But we're getting lighter as we go in. So that the lines are paler and further apart. Now they also have bars on them, but they're not as strong as on a buzzard. So they're following, you see we're following these lines around. But they're not as strong because they don't show up as strong through the dark. And again, at a distance, you're not going to see these little bars. You're just going to see the paleness. So that's darker, getting paler as it goes in. And again, we've got the same thing. These are secondary covers, and then the covers on those, and again, it goes up to a beautiful solid red-brown color. And these sort of designs, again, these vary. Some of them are spots like that, some are like this. A lot of them have these bars on them like that. So they do vary tremendously. Some of these are pointed, but at this sort of scale, you can't show that. Now, these are the darkest, and these are basically half a U shape. So you get that sort of effect. And the same on the edge of the tail. You get quite strong patterns on the edge of the tail. And as you go in, it gets paler and paler. So if you see this tail from above, it's the most beautiful red color, red-brown. From below, if the sun's shining through, it will be red-brown. It will have these little bars. Again, you have to be fairly close to notice that. And they fade out as they go into the middle of the tail. But kites really are, well, they're one of my favorite birds. They fly so elegantly, so gracefully. And I'll leave you to, it's past now, so I'll leave you to finish these off. Don't hurry them. Don't hurry them, finish them off at your leisure. I'll just put a few. The kite has these streaks down the front. It doesn't have bars like a buzzard or a peregrine. It has streaks. And these are dark, very dark brown streaks on top of the red. And this really is the most beautiful red-brown color with quite a pale head, hence the name, the red kite. Right, well, I'll hand back to Ben, and hopefully we'll be able to see some of your drawings. Right.
Thank you,
My
Philip.
ugly mug back on. Oh, here we are. Yes. Right. Right. So thank you, Ben.
All right. Thank you.